I am Kelly Lerner. I'm an architect, the owner of One World Design Architecture, small residential architecture firm in Spokane, Washington. And I've been working with straw bale construction since about 1994. In the United States, China, Mongolia, Argentina, primarily in the West, but I've done a little work in Virginia, of all places. Anyway, that's who I am. That's what I do. Earth plasters, like to get my hands dirty, like to design houses.
Great. And just recently you made a choice to stick to a certain strategy for designing houses. You want to talk about that?
To the extent possible with my firm and with my clients, I've really made the commitment to move towards net zero energy houses. And that just means houses that produce as much energy as they use. And the first part of that strategy is to reduce the needs of the house as low as possible for heating and cooling. And for lighting as well. You can do that through daylighting. But you just want to get those energy needs down as low as possible. And one of the main ways of doing that is using a lot of insulation and a good envelope, creating a good envelope with insulation and windows. And so my material of choice to do that, because it's such a cool material and because it has such low embodied energy, is straw bale. So I like to use straw bale walls as part of the shell, super efficient windows, and then a good passive solar design, so we're getting as much energy, free energy, from the sun as possible to heat the house. And then there are a lot of cooling strategies that you can use that involve shading and ventilation. In the climates of the West where things cool down at night, it usually involves opening high windows and opening low windows. The hot air rises, it sucks the cold air in. You cool down all the mass of the house. Having enough thermal mass in the house is really important. And then you close your windows during the day and that mass keeps the house cool. So insulation, good envelope, lots of thermal mass, an appropriate amount of glass, an appropriate amount of shading.
Mm-hmm. Now when you do need to do a heating system, what are some of the things that you're doing now?
There's a whole array of possible heating systems, all the way from wood if you're in a rural situation, because wood can be a renewable resource. And if you're using wood as a heating source, I either like to go with a wood stove that has some mass or some mass built around it, maybe cob or stone or brick, or a stove that might have some soapstone on it, something where you're heating up mass. That would be sort of the low end of that. You can get into building a masonry stove, which is a high thermal mass stove. The flue gases go through and heat the mass, and then that slowly radiates to the space. If I'm using a more conventional mechanical system, I'll be looking at geothermal heat pumps, which use the temperature of the soil around the house, or maybe a pond around the house, run it through a compressor, a heat pump, to extract heat from that. That's a very efficient way of heating both water and heating air. That's one possibility. Another possibility that I've been looking into and I'm trying to figure out is high mass heating systems, where you actually put a sand bed under your floor, use solar hot water to heat that sand bed during your hot summer months, and then it slowly radiates through that sand and up into the space during the cold winter months. I'm in Spokane, Washington. We have a lot of clouds in the wintertime, not much opportunity for passive solar. So I'm trying to figure out how to bank the heat of the fall and use it in the wintertime.
Great, great. Why don't we switch and do a little bit on China?
Okay.
And let's see, we said we were going to talk about the grassroots approach and train the trainers and the result.
Okay.
Okay. So, in your work in China, tell us about the process that was used, the structure of the whole program, housing program, and then also what are some of the results that you've had. I know that you won the UN Habitat Award in 2005.
Yeah, in 2005.
For your work in China. That
was
fantastic.
We have, just to set the stage, we have about somewhere between 600 and 700 houses, straw bale houses in China. They're hybrids. They're made with brick columns and concrete bond beams, and then infilled with bales. So it's a little bit different structural system. And I think one of the strengths of the program is we tried to look at the local vernacular in terms of design and in terms of materials and what the contractors knew how to work with, and started from that point.
And that's where the brick came from in the concrete?
Yeah, that's where the brick and the concrete came from, because they know masonry construction. They know how to do that, so that's what we did. Yeah. The way the program evolved is the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, Scott Christensen in particular, wanted to introduce straw bale construction in China. And it started by me going to a community, seeing what was there, figuring out a system, coming back to the U.S., working with an engineer, and then sort of importing it back or exporting it to China. And Frank Meyer went over and built that building. It was a light steel frame. They were doing steel frame buildings in the town, so it made a lot of sense for that particular place, and had a bale wrap around it. It was a school, first straw bale building in China. From there, we started to go into communities, started with one small project of 3 houses, and again looked at what are the local materials, how are they building here, how we modify it. So this was a hybrid kind of timber post and beam with some load-bearing elements. You know, very much a hybrid, but again, I was doing a lot of the design work. And as a part of that, we started training other communities, because people were like, wow, this is kind of interesting. We would like to learn about this. And so with each project we did, we were sort of setting up training other areas that had some interest. And when we would do our training, we trained management, you know, sort of local government people, management, foremen, and construction workers. And that's really important that you get those top levels on board, as well as the bottom levels, knowing what they're doing. Because if you just train the workers, it's never going to happen. If you just train the managers, it's never going to happen. You have to train all of them so they know what's going on.
Architects as well?
What we found is that architects in China are primarily doing large buildings, brick or tilt-up concrete, and it was much more effective to work with local contractors and local designers. And what I found, so I designed this first school kind of by myself and used my engineer in the U.S. And then for the second project, it was much more of a team effort, but still I was the lead designer. And it was after that that I really decided this doesn't work so well. And so we adjusted the training so that during the training, each of those teams that I was talking about that had management all the way down to, you know, on-the-ground workers, as a part of the training, they designed the building during the training. So we were figuring out the system, and they helped figure out the system in the beginning, and then they would actually design the building. I would be reviewing their homework every night and working with them to make sure there weren't any big technical problems. But they were doing the design work, like how big the windows were and where they went. And because regionally, there are a lot of regional differences, and we were working in 5 different provinces, so that was really important that the local designs fit the locality and what the issues were, and if it was high seismic or not, and how they did their foundations and all of that. So, and as the project grew, we would start with maybe 10 houses in a local community, see if they were able to pull that off, and if they were, then the next year we might go in and do 25. And I say we go in and do it, but really the way the system was set up is the local government would provide 1/3 of the funding for the project. ADRA, through donors, especially the Kadoorie Foundation, would provide 1/3 of the money for the houses, and the people who are living in the houses would provide either 1/3 of the money or in-kind services, sweat equity towards the house. A lot of times they would be finding the straw. And that was a really important part of the project, that the local community wanted it, local government supported it, everybody was fully invested financially at the same level, so everybody was very motivated to make sure this worked.
And you